replaced Dr. Joe Childs, who had his last meeting last month. That's not me, I promise. Ms. Garone is a practice manager at Advent Health, and she's representing the outside city limits customers, and we're happy to have her. Ms. Garone, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. God bless everyone. I'm very excited for this opportunity, so I'm pretty sure we're going to do great things together.
Fantastic. Thank you.
We're excited to have you and your experience join us, so thank you.
All right, thank you. Scott, let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to wade through some things that were said at the previous City Commission meeting. You can imagine that the UWA is a group of people not unlike yourselves who are there to represent their constituents. And so they have a very specific want and need with what we're doing with Unit 3 with the contract negotiations. And their obligation to their membership is to make sure that they're representing their members as well as they can. There were some things that were said that I do not agree with. And then there's some things that are said that may be a little emotional or just trying to draw back on their own experiences. But I wanted to be able to set the record straight on a few things if I can. So if you can indulge me for a little bit, this will probably take about 15 minutes to roll through, but I think it's important that we do. One of the concerns, and by the way, I'm not going to cover every single one because most of the things that were said, I think were fairly obvious. And there's some other things that were said that probably just need some clarification. So as you all know, we participate in a power pool. That's a sharing of generation resources. The power pool consists of Orlando Utilities Commission and the Florida Municipal Power Agency and Lakeland Electric. And when we participate in this pool, what we're saying is that we agree to carry the amount of capacity that we need to serve all of our needs if we had to, and therefore we can exchange economic energy with each other whenever we want to. And we choose to do this on a hourly basis. And so the way this works is, let's say Unit 5 natural gas prices, our Unit 5 natural gas prices are low. Our Unit 5 is going to be the first ones on the stack, as we call it, to get dispatched for use because it's going to be one of the cheapest ones in the pool. And then they start stacking generators on top of each other for how much electricity we need to generate based on what the cost is for the generation. So in the day and age that we're in right now, the natural gas generators, the combined cycle ones, really highly efficient generators, they get dispatched first. And then the coal units come on right after that. And if we hit periods of high temperatures, maybe we have an outage on a large generator and we just need other resources, you can kind of see in this little graph I've got where there's some spikes. That's representative of having to call on the very, very high-priced generators periodically. So, one of the comments that was made was that we're going to, Lakeland Electric will be subject to the highest rates in the state because we're going to be buying from the pool. And I'll tell you, you can glance at this chart with the description I'm going to give you in a minute. You can see almost instantly that that's not true. There are periods of time, and by the way, this is a look at hourly cost for megawatt hour in the power pool for the year of 2020. So you see these large spikes and you go, wow, that looks concerning. Well, it's not really concerning because that spike was just 1 hour or 2 hours during a day when we absolutely had to have it to get through the day. So the trend lines that you're seeing, it should be red is where the maximums are, where the big spikes are. The line in the middle that I'm showing green on my screen, that's the average. That's pretty much what we would consider as our cost is for participating in the pool. And then the blue, of course, is the minimums. So that's every hour of the year in 2020 that we're looking at. The agreement that we have with OUC is to purchase energy when we need it. We don't necessarily have to purchase it year-round. So that's the difference between a typical power purchase agreement and the one that we have with the OUC. We are paying a $23.5 million capacity payment. And what that does is it gives us a reservation against a generator or a portfolio of generators so that we can have energy if and when we need it. In this particular case, we're only going to have to take it when we do need it. So you get into periods of time like we're in right now, our loads tend to be low. And so we may not need to buy power from the pool. We may be able to generate it cheaper ourselves. Or maybe we can buy it at what you're looking at, the blue line on the bottom at the minimums. So there's opportunities there to really, get a fair price for energy. And even if you see the price spikes that you see on that chart, if you look at the average line, it's a whole lot less volatile than what it appears to be. And I said before, it's really not volatile typically. If we have generators down, if you think about last March, for example, last March was hotter than normal for a good part of the month. And March is when a lot of people like to take their generators down for maintenance. And so you might expect that we're going to have to run generators such as our Winston diesel peakers. If we have to fire up those diesel peakers, you know that it's going to cost a lot of money for that purpose. But we're also only going to run them for about an hour or two and then take them back offline. During that period of time in March, if we're taking our generators down for maintenance, everybody else in the state is too. And so therefore, it's not like you can just go out on the market and find something cheaper, because everybody's going to be a little constrained if the temperatures get up. So I just want to assure you, while we certainly can see price spikes, and I think one of the people mentioned that we could pay $150 megawatt hour. Well, it was a lot more than that, as you can see, for that one. That's true. That's true. But it's not as impactful as what he was believing that it was. Scott, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is representative of the average monthly cost of power that's in the pool. And then you can see kind of that orangish looking line at about 25. That's about what the dispatched cost of our coal generator is. On average, about $25 a megawatt hour. So there's some months in March. You can see where I was talking about March was hotter than normal. And you look over at August, we had something similar going on in August for the prices to get up that high. But what I want to really draw your attention to is May, June, and July. Those are really hot months typically, maybe half of May, not necessarily the whole month. But June and July certainly are almost always hot months. But look where the prices are for that. It looks that way because the generators that we have in the fleet, with the exception of our Unit 3, were online and ready to go. So the average cost for energy during that time was very good. Even though it was really hot and we had a lot of generators running, the price for electricity was good. So when we ran the analysis, when Gina ran the incremental analysis, which was a look at the difference between shutting our coal unit down in March versus keeping it running to 2024. When Gina looked at that analysis, Paul Ships ran some numbers based on the cost of energy, the differential for what we could generate ourselves versus what we could buy it through the pool typically. And you can kind of take a good look at this one. And even in this year, it would have been a net benefit to buy from the pool, which we were doing anyway because our generator was offline. But generally, it works out to be about a wash. The cost of energy, whether we did it ourselves or bought it from the pool, would work out to be about a wash. And so in the incremental analysis, it did not include the cost of energy because it was negligible. There was no real difference to even report on. So it made sense to do it that way. Okay, Scott, I think I'm done with that. And I've got a few more comments to run through, and then we'll get into the main part of the program. One of the other concerns that was talked about was the financial analysis itself. And again, it was incremental. It was just based on the cost differential between a shutdown in 2021 and a shutdown in 2024. One of the comments made was that we'd had to continue to pay out a coal contract plus a kicker. I don't know what a kicker is, but the city commission voted to decommission the generator, which gave us the ability to serve up 60 days notice to enter into a contract cancellation period. And that's where we're at right now. We provided that 60 days notice right after the vote was taken the next day. There was a comment made that we'd have to pay personnel until 2025, and that's because of the contract, and that's just an inaccurate assumption. Everyone knows how this contract is going to work. There was no provisions for any of that anywhere. It was just inaccurate. And then a comment was made that we would pay costs to tear down and clean up the land and all the pollution cleanup costs. And that is very true, but it's not relevant because that's part of the decommissioning. Whether we decommission it today, in March, or in 2024, or any other time, you still have to pay decommissioning costs. And I'll tell you, the amount of risk that's associated with keeping it running when it comes to environmental cleanup costs only increases. It's never going to decrease. The $23 million capacity cost for the power purchase agreement, it's shown as $14.5 million in Gina's analysis, but it's a net of expenses versus the savings for seizing coal operations. So rather than it being a full $23.5 million cost, when you net that out, it was only a $14.5 million cost. And again, there's no megawatt hour sales in that because it just washed out. So the incremental benefit, regardless of all that, still remains the same. For March 2021, it's a shutdown of $13.1 million. And this is why it doesn't make sense to say, we'll just put that $23 million back into the generator and keeping it running, because it just doesn't make sense to do that. It doesn't make good financial sense, nor does it make operational sense. I want to talk a little bit about decommissioning costs. As I said before, these expenses will exist regardless of when we shut it down. Today, you're going to hear us asking for approval for an agreement with an engineering firm, Black & Veatch, to work with staff on the decommissioning. Black & Veatch is a very well-recognized industry group that does this kind of thing and a lot other work in this industry. And they're very, very good at it and very well recognized for it. So this is certainly a talent that we don't have in-house that we'd like to get on board with this sooner rather than later. Our main concern environmentally is going to be the landfill. So when we're burning the coal, you have what we call coal combustion residual. You've got ash, and you've got the components that can turn into drywall eventually, I guess. And so Tim Seiko, I believe, sent a report to the City Commission a while back, a couple of weeks ago, that focused heavily on decommissioning. And I found that report to be very instructive, but it's impossible to sit there and read that report and say our costs, therefore, are going to be X. We just don't know. I know that you were given a figure of $30 million, and I would dispute that, but at the same time, I don't know what our cost is going to be. Actually a very large utility in the Midwest, I believe it was in Texas, went through this already, and they're larger than we are, and their landfill was larger than ours. And they paid a paltry $4.8 million for remediation. A utility in Florida went through it on a larger scale, and theirs was closer to 40 or maybe even almost 50. But in both of those cases, the size of the landfill was significantly larger than ours is. So we're going to be taking a look at that. We're going to see what the impacts are going to be. Had we shut it down in 2024, we would probably already be at this point, but we're not, and this is just the state of the business right now. So the consultant's going to talk to us about the most optimal solution, and then we'll create a timeline. We'll come back to you all and let you know what that cost is going to be. The funding mechanism for this, though, will go through the environmental rate that we have. And what we're looking at now is for the things that are going to be falling out of the environmental rate that we're covering the cost for now while the coal generator is running, some of those things will fall away, and we'll still have the stranded debt from the selective catalytic reduction equipment, and then we would start putting in the cost for the decommissioning in terms of the environmental decommissioning in that as well. We're not really sure what the impact on that rate is going to be, but I do not think it's going to be too unmanageable. Basically, because you take the cost of those things, you amortize it out over a long time. Okay, finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about a final concern, and that's something that's near and dear to all of your hearts and all in mine too, and that's the employee transition process. At Lakeland Electric, we recognized that this was going on, and we started a process about 2 months ago where we were really taking a good hard look at positions that we could feel that looked like they might be suitable for Macintosh employees. And so we started that process, and we've been relatively successful. We've been able to take 6 employees so far into positions in Joey Curry's group in T&D, transmission and distribution. But some of you might have heard me say our ability to do this is probably going to peak at about 10 positions. We just don't have an unlimited amount of positions open that we can take and do something with. We will probably get a full 10, maybe as many as 12, but that's probably going to be it. If we have any retirements along the way, we're going to give them similar consideration. Now, HR established about 3 weeks ago that Macintosh employees are given a priority interview for positions anywhere in the city that they qualify for. So if they meet minimum qualifications, they're guaranteed an interview. And I think that's a great deal because we don't want people to be flushed out simply because the qualifications on paper don't look well when you might have a really good, solid employee that you would want to pick up. So if you don't interview, you just don't know. And then finally, Mark Farrington's team, I can't say enough good things about what they've been doing. That includes Cindy Marsh, Mark himself and Cindy Marsh, Kathy McNellis and some others, and also Sherry Watson and then Joyce Dye as his team. They've conducted several training sessions with employees, and from everything that I'm hearing, it has been going very, very well. They've been having training on using the city's job board, resume writing, interviewing skills. They're doing one-on-ones with employees, the ones that want it. And then they're currently scheduling encore presentations to keep that momentum going. So I'm really proud of Mark and that team and Joyce and Sherry. I think they've done a great job. And I think, Mr. Mayor and everyone, that hits kind of the high points of the things that I wanted to talk about. But if you heard something else that you got a question about, I'd be happy to address it. Commissioner Selvage, I think had a question.
Yes, thank you, Joe. And I apologize to the group because I'm only my second utility meeting since being back. And so what I've followed over the months is through the media. But last time, Joe, you described to us the definitions of decommissioning and shutdown. And I'm sorry if I'm confused, but on March 31st of 21, does Unit 3 shut down? The burners go out?
So March 31st will represent the end of continuing coal operations. Let's put it that way. If we have a certain amount of coal on the ground that we need to get burned and we need some more time beyond that date to burn it, we will burn that down and just consider that part of the decommissioning process. But that's kind of an on or about type thing.
And so on or about, do you think we're still going to have coal on the ground? Is it going to be burning for another month, another 6 months?
No, it certainly won't be that long. We're right now, we're the trend line of the size of the coal pile out there at Macintosh is just going down and down and down. Ms. Bombard, as well as the coal operations people at Macintosh, are very well aware of what it is that we need to do in managing the amount of coal that we have. We are in the final stages of delivery of coal over this month. We might take a delivery or two in March, but we're going to be seizing that by mid-March. We won't need to take any more deliveries probably.
Well, pretty simple. We're going to burn it until the coal runs out.
That's the plan.
Okay. Second question. There's always the concern over the years, as you know, about Lakeland's ability to generate power. There's been a lot of controversy about that. That's one of the things we have been blessed with here. With the closing of coal plants like this, will Lakeland face in the next 10 years a situation where it will not be able to generate internally enough power for the city? Are we going to be tied to buying from the pool for the foreseeable future?
That's a great question, and I appreciate that. It kind of hits on a few points, and I'll get back to one of the comments I made earlier. If you don't have generation on the ground, then you can't buy in the pool. So you have to have that much generation to cover your own needs anyway, right? And so our longer term plan is to replace the capacity that we're missing from Unit 3, which remember, we're only losing our entitlement rights to 220 megawatts. I'm going to do that because it's on or about 220 megawatts. We're also fat with generation capacity. That's PHAT fat. And And so we don't need to replace 220. We're short about 139. So yes, we're going to continue to generate. And Commissioner Selvage, you weren't here when we had these conversations previously. It was about a year ago. And I heard pretty well from this utility committee that they wanted us to stay in the generation business.
Okay.
They felt like that was a good vision for Lakeland. And so that gave me the marching orders that I needed to go out and get replacement capacity.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm sorry to take the committee's time because I had missed that, but I understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Selvage, I would tell you that's not a waste of time for us. It's good for the review again, anyway, especially in light of the comments. So I want you to know I certainly appreciate your having mentioned this at our agenda study to do today. It's imperative that people recognize that as a general manager, Mr. Ivy has led this organization well to maximize the amount of cost-effective production while recognizing the inevitability of a very, very old plant. And so, whereas the timing is unfortunate anytime, because when we deal with people, we deal with our emotions. The logic of this is very real. And so making this transition now is not only cost prudent, but it allows us to have the time to bring up to speed what we need to do, as well as clean up what has to be done in the decommissioning process. So at least from my perspective, I'm very, very appreciative of that leadership. Are there any other comments from the committee? Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Joel. Couple of questions just to refresh my memory. Explain, as I understand it, this contract with OUC, they originally contacted us because they had more capacity because I believe TECO canceled a contract with them or something. Is that right?
It was a different utility, yes.
Okay, but anyway, so we, as part of this deal, then, correct me if I'm wrong, are we paying a $23.5 million upfront cost?
That's the capacity and the cost of the capacity entitlement over the term of the agreement. So that'll be
not upfront.
No, that'll be an ongoing expense, but it's a firm cost. We will be paying it in total $23.5 million.
Okay, so we'll use that up over what period of time is this contract going to be for?
Yeah, we're looking at about 3.5 years. We've got some ins and outs in the agreement if it goes sooner or if it goes later to be able to keep it going. But yeah, it's 3.5 years.
What would happen, let's say that OUC, because I think OUC is running some coal plants. If they decided to shut down and did not have the capacity in order to provide to us under this contract, what happens then?
The way this particular arrangement is considered, I'll say, we are the same as OUC's native load. So whatever they do for their own native load, they also have to do to us. They can't just cut us out because they just don't want to anymore. They're obligated under contract. So if let's say one of their coal generators took a bad turn and they just didn't want to do anything to fix it back up again, they would have to find replacement power for that anyway, somewhere in the state. And then they would have to find enough to cover our needs as well.
So if that was the case, then if their costs went up substantially, they are allowed to pass that cost on to us?
We're still going to be obligated to what those costs look like through the CHIP mechanism that I was just talking with you about. And so would it be a straight pass through? No, it would be averaged out by the generation that we have in the pool still that's working. So if they had to buy power at an extraordinarily high price, we're the same as their native load. So it would average out just the same as they would for their own customers.
So they would not be put in a position where they would be losing money if that happened in our contract?
No.
They would be able to pass that cost somehow on to us?
Well, a reasonable amount of it, sure. You average it out, and that's what you charge your own customers, and that's what they would charge us. Okay.
And this is a better price than we could get in the pool at large, and it just puts us kind of, you might say, at the front of the line with regards to this. Is that right? That's what we're paying our $23.5 million for.
Right, that's exactly right. And one of the things that makes this so appealing was that unlike most power purchase agreements where you buy a certain amount of capacity and you also take a certain amount of energy, we're not beholden to that necessarily. If we don't need the energy during certain times of the year, then we don't have to take it. Other arrangements that you might have, let's say we did something with another investor-owned utility, you probably take that amount of energy requirement that you have, and that's your first, almost like a generator. You put it at the bottom of the stack, and you have to take it whether you want it or not. So whatever the price is, you got to take it.
Would you consider this contract not only favorable but somewhat unusual?
Not at all unusual, and I don't know that I would call it favorable because it's using the pool chip mechanism. We generally are a net buyer in the pool all the time anyway, and so this to me feels like Monday, honestly. It's just another day in paradise. So I don't think it's extraordinary. It's a good deal in the way that it's working in that we don't have to take the energy if we don't need it, but beyond that, it's very typical for how we're already conducting our business.
Thank you.
Good questions, Mr. Johnson. Are there any other questions from committee members? All right. Let's go ahead then to the next part of the presentation. Ms. Riley.
Very good. The long-awaited, much vaunted Scott Bishop is going to talk to us about our emerging technology and the road ahead. Now, I would like to say prior to getting into this, I hope you all can appreciate the magnitude of the decisions that we've just made in order to get to this point. This is a big deal to decide that you're going to shut down a coal plant. It's a huge deal that not too many city commissions would be able to participate in from the time of their service. You all have done that. And so what I want to try to do is start focusing on the fact that we're in a new era for electric generation in Lakeland Electric and in the state of Florida. We've got some great things that we're going to be doing, trying to be more agile, be able to adapt more quickly to changes that are coming along in our industry. And those changes, you know, in normal business terms, it's like watching soil erosion. It's not real fast. But for electric utility, the pace is picking up pretty quick. And since we tend to make investments in 20 to 50-year cycles, it's very difficult for us to turn and be that agile. But some of the things that Scott's going to be talking about, hopefully will have you on the edge of your seats, understanding that we have got to take steps to increase our agility. So, Scott, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Joel. Scott Bishop, Manager of Emerging Technology. In whole, our world is changing, not in any particular one way, but in all ways. The people, the technology, the collective environment we work around, that which we plan around, are all currently moving. Okay, so I want to take several minutes and talk about the emerging technology space and the road ahead. Joel talked about our 5-year strategic direction on how we continually roll it around and move it forward. He also laid out the 3-lane highway concept and some of the initiatives we're working on. I'm here to take those two concepts, rolling strategic direction and 3-lane highway, and give you a glance at how we're positioning going forward, the emerging tech space and what we are seeing and experiencing. So first of all, what is emerging technology? AI, robotics, VR, 5G, quantum computing, blockchain, and their likes. If you were to Google what is emerging technology, those would be the things that would come up. They are emerging technology. They are on our radar, but that's not the focus of this presentation. Their potential impacts as far as advancements in productivity, efficiency, reduction in costs, they're something that can't be ignored. We strive to focus more on emerging tech that could and does directly affect our core business. All those previously mentioned could, so we must be the vanguard and kind of keep an eye on them. But we do tend to look a little differently, though, and are more directly utility focused. So things like solar and distributed generation, variable as it may be, has seen its amount, pace, and veracity of installs increase. Anywhere between 10 to 20 customers every month are adding solar to their homes in our service territory. We've released a RFP for 50 to 74 megawatts of utility scale solar with a 5 to 10 megawatt battery storage. Let's take a moment and talk about solar. So, due to improving technology, solar is relatively clean, relatively cost-effective resource that should be added to our quiver of arrows. Solar alone is a variable resource that has some hurdles when it comes to reliability on the grid. The graph, orange and red graph, shows the typical residential solar output versus in red, the typical residential load curve. So you can see that after 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a sunny summer day, load on the system in aggregate exceeds solar output as the sun begins to wane. So we must consider solar coupled with other technologies in order to meet the needs of our customers. So the upper right graph, it's a sunny summer day again, not smooth for convenience, but the actual output of our solar unit in aggregate. The variation that you see is white puffy clouds. Yes, soon solar emissivity and light cloud cover become a factor in grid reliability. The more solar we install, the more we have to pay attention to white puffy clouds. So let's take a look at other technologies. Hydrogen, SMR, small modular reactors, fuel cells, battery storage, electric vehicles, and all those other technologies that have more of a direct impact on our core business have to be watched, planned around, and implemented as prudently as possible to drive the core business at the right time. We will talk about all those technologies later. Not sure if you're aware, but during the last stimulus bill that Congress passed, they also quietly passed the AEIA, the American Energy Innovation Act. It focuses on clean energy, grid security, and competitiveness in the energy markets. Billions of dollars of incentives in a multitude of categories were appropriated. It also sets up a government office for growth and oversight around technology in the spaces I just mentioned. It also kind of sets the tone for the coming administration that they're very keen on the clean energy space and the opportunities will be abundant. But why does any of this matter to us? So I want to take a look at actually what you were just talking about. This is a timeline version of our highway concept that kind of speaks to emerging technology and some of the directions and future decisions we'll need to make going forward. So the numbers presented are in megawatts. The 920 road sign megawatt load is our peak load summer day that we currently work around. It includes both load and capacity requirements needed for reliability. It's close to exact, but it's an approximation just for some good numbers. The fleet bus is 920 megawatts of what we were capable of in capacity before you see Unit 3 taking the off-ramp. You can see the 139 megawatt PPA coming on, and it's a great bridge and a cost-effective bridge that gets us to the future, where you see the solar 74 megawatts and the RICE engines kind of come in at 23 to kind of start supplementing some of our growth. The 1% EV load in 2025 is a hopeful total system load we could see annually in aggregate if we were to facilitate a robust residential solar program and all across all sectors. So if you look, the Unit 8 in 2022, well, it's actually 30 years old this year. And if you look out past that, you see Unit 5 is 30 years old in 2030. So we've got some big decisions coming up, and we got a lot of opportunity. So our goal is to build a strong, agile, responsive organization. No matter what the future holds, we have to start managing the future now. So how do we do that? I don't read tea leaves, but we got to start somewhere. So I wanted to start this journey focusing around tenets that we control. All these words were just thrown on a whiteboard in my office, kind of like a Jackson Pollock splatter. Just listing that which can and does affect our core, what we're researching, what we currently do. Then I needed some way to organize it. So I quickly grouped them into affordable, dependable, sustainable. They all seem to kind of fit. Well, I know that's mantra, moniker, if you will, like a just do it or a finger licking good. But affordable, We are affordable, dependable, sustainable. Lowest residential rates last month, reliability numbers in the top quartile, and a 60% CO2 reduction since 2004. With solid financials and great people throughout the organization, definitely something we're going to launch from. So pretty effectively, these business tenants fit into these categories. It's all in something that we do. Though some may be debatable as to where they are, some cross all the areas. The three-column approach kind of brought forward the conundrum of what do we do from here? So everything kind of fits into a box. How do we start to manage that? So then I realized we could take the success and evolution of our reliability committee, reproduce it, and then the direct emerging technology space items could be planned and directed by an electrification committee, which we could stand up, while we could take our core ops stuff and put business continuity folks around it. So let's take a look at how that might work. So here's the meat and potatoes of the presentation, or for my vegan friends, the kale and the quinoa. So a 5-year rolling strategic direction, 3-lane highway, emerging technology, business continuity, reliability, all under the umbrella of governance. The hope of this endeavor is to maintain and evolve an affordable, dependable, sustainable business that continues to be an agile enterprise for the city of Lakeland. In order to fend off disruption, we need to get our minds around strategic governance. Nothing listed here is carved in stone, nor is this list all-encompassing. It's a framework, leveraging our known resources and successes in order to flourish and survive. This is an all-hands-on-deck outlook. We need engaged people, passionate about each cause. That includes you, commissioners and committee members. It includes the citizens of Lakeland, our employees at the city, and any stakeholder that may be affected. This is getting the right people in the room, asking the right questions at the right time for the right reason, and developing actionable results and strategy. This framework tries to simplify all the complex and various topics that we tackle with oversight at the top, driving direction downward, and disseminating those questions to the appropriate group. This allows innovation to thrive. This is the framework we're trying to set in place. There's not enough time to talk about all of these. Any of you have any questions about those, then actually give me a call and we can talk about any one of them. But I'd like to take some time to talk about a few of them. So, carbon policy. It is a heavy lift. The promises and problems of environmentally just and publicly accepted carbon policy are a daunting task. We will bring this back to you in several stages throughout the rest of the year. We are committed to a carbon neutral future and getting this topic right. Hydrogen. Commissioner Matt is excited about hydrogen as I am, as it could be the holy grail of our low carbon energy future. The infrastructure needs funded, the timing and economics need work, but many, many utilities and vendors around the country are working on just that. Commissioner Madden, if you'd like to have a few words about our hydrogen strategy and initial initiatives, you can have the floor.
Thank you so much, Scott. So this is really exciting, and I think that Joel, our commander at the helm, was so excited to get Scott in this emerging tech position so that all of my exciting emails about hydrogen could go to Scott instead of Joel. Although, of course, I CC our city manager, Sean Sherrouth, and everyone else, on all of these developments. So we have been going back and forth, particularly since the summer, because the American Public Power Association, Florida Municipal Electric Association, just a variety of different agencies have hosted webinars, that typically would be the events that we would attend, as a live conference. And the common theme thread through all of them this past 6 months or so has been the increasing need to figure out what's going to connect the dots when we go to this net zero, decarbonization future, because what they're finding is in so many of the cases, the renewables are just not sufficient because of their intermittency. And the hopes that we've placed in batteries are not sufficient as well. So you have people ahead of us, Joel always says we can't be on the bleeding edge. Otherwise, then we are not going to be in those three important pillars of affordability. And sometimes reliability too, when you get into something before all the kinks are worked out of new technology. But we have folks, and I'm going to name just a couple of pilot programs so it's not just Stephanie Madden who is excited. But in California and in Washington and in the West, certainly they're ahead of us with regards to strides, converting large swaths of land to solar farms, and then through the Midwest and West with the wind turbine fields that you've seen if you've driven through. And the best scientists and MIT studies are all showing that because of the intermittency, either it produces such a large amount of energy that it pretty much shuts down the transmission lines. It's too much for the grid, or it's dark and it's cold. I've recently read about Germany getting to the same situation as California with regard to these, I think they call them Dunkelfalven or something, dark doldrums, and what to do about those. When the wind's not perfect and the sun's not shining, the size of the batteries and the insufficiency of that approach is just the thing causing them all stress. So because of that, I think they're going back to George W. Bush's that he gave, that hydrogen was the fuel of the future way back when, and that was derailed a little bit, put on the back burner because of the expense at the time of electrolyzers and such to make the hydrogen. But it's like everything, demand increases supply and causes the price to go down, like we've seen with solar. Well, if you only consider that, George W. Bush at the time was probably thinking only with regard to the transportation, fuel cells competing with battery for, who's going to win, Tesla or Nikola? Well, obviously it looks like Tesla's winning and Elon Musk and his lithium ions are winning right now the race. But if fuel cells are not the only things using hydrogen, but also energy producers are using hydrogen, then the demand is explosive. So if you can, in Douglas County in Washington, they have a huge project going forward. They're going to have their first hydrogen fueling station. They're able to make the hydrogen, the green hydrogen, from a hydroelectric plant near Wenatchee out there, and then they can transport the hydrogen made by the electrolyzer from water over to an equidistant place. They're building a fueling station. So they're not only being able to utilize the extra renewable power from the hydroelectricity, fuel the electrolyzer to make the hydrogen and put it back into the grid, but then they also can store it and transport it to a fueling station to fill EV vehicles, fuel cell EVs. And so, I've been listening like, okay, so who's going to convert to fuel cell, electric vehicles? Mainly the cars that we see are batteries. Well, they started to say things like, I heard of Federal Express and at Amazon, they're all saying, well, we're seeing the shortfalls of having to stop for lengthy times, even with the fast chargers on the batteries. You would probably have our fleets, our mid and heavy size fleets, convert to fuel cell if we can get more hydrogen production, which made me think about Lakeland, Florida being equidistant in the middle of the state and our hub of warehouse and distribution. And we have fleets like Saddle Creek, who's been talking to folks at Florida Poly with regard to going towards fuel cell technology. And this just started to get me all so excited because some of these things, you talk about hydro, we can't do it. Wind, we can't do it unless we do offshore. All of these exciting things. It's like, I got so excited, as you know, about the small modular nuclear reactors that NuScale is doing, and they are phenomenal. They're small. They've mitigated all the disastrous results of the things that we've seen on things like, on documentaries about nuclear power plants. But still, those you have to submerge into water 75 feet deep. And so we're a peninsula, and with that, that being problematic for us. And what about the waste still at the end of the day? And they are making great strides with nuclear and thinking that some nuclear plants could fuel electrolyzers around the world. But for us, if we, built more solar panels, I'm just like, it just takes up our environmental, lands. Do we want our whole peninsula filled with EV? And yet, if we could concentrate solar in an area to fuel electrolyzers to make hydrogen, and hydrogen then could go back to our grid and fuel our grid when during the intermittency of solar, and then also give us another growth area, because then we can sell it to the transportation folks and have hydrogen fueling stations. There's just, so much that actually Florida could do with regard to this that would boost our economy, we have so many synergies already going on here with Florida Poly, with that open land around it, with SunTrax and innovation and transportation at large, with fleets converting. So Scott has really been very kind to listen to all of my Walt Disney dreaming. And we are going to be talking again on Tuesday about hydrogen and listening to every webinar that we can to find out about things like the pilot program in France that is already, they're retrofitting and converting turbines, and also the natural gas pipelines, which is also something I really want to focus on that's highly significant. This is not abandon coal, yes, and then abandon fracking and natural gas. This is utilizing natural gas infrastructure with the gas turbines and the gas pipelines, and intermittently at different increments adding hydrogen. And so they already are doing this in Germany. They're doing this in France. The Mitsubishi, Scott listened to they're working on their turbines to be able to convert to natural gas already on the get-go. In the California study with LA, they're putting their new gas turbines in with their new plant, all ready to be able to be 30% hydrogen by 2023, and then go towards 100% hydrogen by the deadline of 2050 or whatever it is that the governments would suggest. But this is super exciting, I think, for us, because it's not something totally untested, something that we can't do in Florida. But this is the first time that when I've heard about carbon goals that I've been like, wow, maybe it's possible. Because before now, to Scott's point, there's been so many things about renewables and so many limitations that we've had to be able to, it just almost seemed like we needed pixie dust to get there. But this hydrogen could really be a game changer.
Matt, and we're definitely going to take some strides and look at the current environment, what it looks like, and see if we can get some traction on it's a future decision that we need to start putting action around now. So I'm all in on let's start looking at the future. So the next thing we got on the docket is community awareness. This is huge, because if we don't get our community and we don't get our folks excited about the same things we're excited about, none of this gets any traction. So we got to get folks involved. We got to continue to improve our community awareness, our environmental energy efficiency initiatives. We got to give more options to customers. We have to have community awareness around communication efforts, new programs that focus on customer action steps. We got to include it in social media, workshops, webinars, hands-on conferences. We need the full gamut across the board in order to get the knowledge and resources for everyone to meet their personal energy goals. So community awareness and education and knowledge to our folks are going to be crucial to our success. So I work hand in hand a lot with Catherine Lacey, and it's going to be a heavy lift for us to try to get the right information to the right people as they need it. All right, public-private charging. We currently have submitted Department of Environmental Protection, Volkswagen mitigation dollars, funding to install 4 battery electric fast chargers, I-4 North 98, adjacent to the Travelodge there. These chargers can fully charge an electric vehicle in 20 to 30 minutes. Cindy Clemens and Hannah Ball have done quite a bit of heavy lifting on this grant application, and we're hopeful of its successes. So let's talk about electric vehicles for a little bit while they're here and in the forefront. So this graph is from JP Morgan. It shows current EVs on the road and future estimates. BEVs, battery electric vehicles, that's the blue. Hybrid is white. Those are the vehicles like the Priuses. And then there's the PHEV in yellow, the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, which does plug in, has a fixed amount of electric, and then the ICE motor kicks in after that, the internal combustion. So as you can see from the graph, by 2025, electric vehicles on the road will be about 32% of the market. 32% of the market. By 2030, the market flips to the electric side. Instead of vehicles needing a gas station, they're going to need electric car charging. An electric vehicle charger doesn't look like an appliance, but it looks like a hot water heater or dryer in similarity, both in cost to the customer and a year's consumption and load required for space on the grid. So as far as the utility has to manage it, it's equivalent of a large appliance. Okay, so these numbers, if forecast properly, should be manageable if we strategically start playing around it now. I know you may or may not be excited about electric vehicles, but they're here. Here's 4 Jetson future concept cars, right? No, these are 4 in production 2021 fully electric vehicles. Ford Mustang on the top left, Mustang Mach-E, completely sold out in pre-order. Top right, the Lucid Air is a direct competition to the Tesla Model S. The national TV ad campaigns already started. I saw it watching football one weekend. The bottom left, the truck, is the Rivian RT1. Rivian sent 2 trucks to Patagonia in Argentina on a 13,000-mile trip back to LA to prove off-road capability and charging infrastructure are not barriers. Rivian's also well-funded, and they had a pre-order. It's also sold out, and they go into production sometime next month. Yes, bottom right-hand corner, that is a Mercedes-Benz Gullwing fully electric. Mercedes is in the electric game as well. There's enough coming in all these areas that we got to get around what it is that we're managing and how it's coming at us. So the whole point of this was that framework's in place and we all got to get engaged because our world is changing. The people, the technology, and the collective environment we plan around and operate in are constantly moving. And that's all I have. Take some questions.
All right, I see Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Scott. That was great. My one question, as you're talking about emerging technology in the first slide and AI and robotics, and how are we looking at these trends to see where they fit operationally? No, we're not on the bleeding edge, but how it impacts what we need to be doing by the time we get to 2030. I know it's a lot. As you said, there's a lot coming at us. But how do we look at these technologies, the trends, pair them with our operations?
It's really more market research. I have a lot of, I'm on a lot of groups and a lot of utility groups that are looking in those IT spaces. Some are talking about using blockchain now for transactions. Others are looking at partnering with a vendor and getting an AI resource into their group to start leveraging those technologies. I know there's a ton going on there, and that market space is always moving. What happens is if any of those bubble to the top and we see a direct core business being affected by one, then that would be the point of this framework, is to put an assault team, if you will, on that topic and make sure that we're asking the right questions about it. There's a lot there, I know. We try to stay on all of it.
Well, I'm thrilled that we're looking at how we can connect to these emerging technologies. And yes, we may not be at the forefront, but there certainly seem to be tremendous opportunities to bring these things into the utility. And I look at Summit as we're partnering with them. What are ways to be able to leverage their expertise and really moving towards a smart city? So it's no small order, but I'm just encouraged by your presentation, the things you're looking at and the things that we're hearing today, and to be able to envision. I know Commissioner Madden talks about being big dreams or Disney World dreamers, but I think that's important, and it's encouraging to see a municipal utility doing those types of things. So I encourage it. I think it's great.
when emerging technologies are this volatile, it's essential to avoid being on the bleeding edge. You have to have lots of antennas up about what can happen and what is happening with the early adopters. And there's a big difference between being someone who's a purchaser of versus a provider to in terms of cost effectiveness. And so I think where someone can personally want to take some of those risks as a utility, we have to watch our due diligence very, very carefully, but not be late. So good comment, Commissioner McLeod. And then I see Commissioner Walker. You're still muted, sir.
Could you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Got me now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know what Scott, thank you again for the presentation. And it appears that we're probably moving toward, would you categorize what you have shared with us as a probably multi-generation sources kind of a utility as things move, as things progress, because it will not be just one or two sources of generation, but it could be maybe 3 or 4 sources. Is that correct?
We need all arrows in the quiver. And yes, as many as we can possibly find that are cost effective and benefit our customers.
Okay, now this is a question maybe you may not be able to answer, maybe cannot answer, but hopefully Mr. Ivy can. With what regulation that we find coming to us as a utility from a federal standpoint, especially when it came to the federal government's clean energy kind of initiative, and went from what I guess the Obama administration has shared versus now, then Trump, and then now we're back with Biden. What are we seeing? Have we positioned ourselves to make sure that we're, I guess, in line with whatever regulation that may fall comes down to us, or as a utility from the federal level?
So I would say that we are doing that as we speak. And when President Obama was in office, his group created the Clean Power Plan. I think that's what it was called. And in that plan were some very specific targets that were set on emissions for generation and whatnot. And the industry generally has been trying to go down that path and accommodate lower and lower volumes of carbon emissions as we've gone through the decades. But what was missing was anything that really drove us to a certain number. I didn't actually have any issues with the numbers that President Obama put out there. What I had issues with was his timeline. And so I think we go through stages with the federal government where they try to create not a barrier, but more like a goal, an end game for us to be shooting for. And then you have to go in and litigate where it is you think that you need to wind up. So the issue that I had with President Obama's was we couldn't get there in time without having to take drastic action and then cause the prices to my customers to go up through the roof, which is not a good equation for anybody. So to the extent that the federal government can create the rules, and that seems to be where President Biden is headed, to the extent that they can create the rules that will help us, focus on something to get to a point in time, my wish would be they would get out of the way once they do that and let us get there and stop trying to be, the commander of the ship that tells you exactly how you also need to do it. Because every utility in the country is at various stages of this. And so as long as we're going down the right path to create cleaner and cleaner burning fuel sources, then I think we're in the right game. With the moves that we're making with these RICE engines, you heard Scott's number, I think it was 62% since 2004 would be our reduction in carbon emissions. That's pretty awesome. That's very awesome. And so we're going to keep improving on that over time. But too much meddling in a 25 to 40 year investment that we have to make can cause us problems as we're going down the path. So we can't have that much volatility in terms of legislation or regulation. We need to have a little bit more middle of the road pieces to it. So, as you guys are talking to your federal and state level elected officials, I would appreciate just kind of that being the storyline that we need to be talking about. Is it's okay to have goals and targets. Everybody's all for that. but it needs to be things that we can do in the manner that makes sense for us at the time.
Any other committee member comments or questions? Commissioner Selvage.
Thank you, Mayor. The 2020 census, Scott and Joel, is coming out in a couple of months, and I'm confident that we're going to see a significant increase in our population. And more than likely, for the next 10 years, we're going to see dramatic increases in population in the Central Florida area. And I'm struck by the similarities between our ongoing water debates. And in water, we're facing the same. We need more water, and we need to find alternate ways to produce it. But water seems to be driven more by population than electricity. Isn't it true that we are going to need to produce not only alternate ways of power, but more of it? You mentioned 920 megawatts. Does that take into account the growth of Lakeland, including not only residences but companies? Are you confident that we're not going to be in a position where we won't have enough electricity to have smart growth?
Scott, I'll jump on that one real quick if you don't mind. The 920 is pretty much what we have on the ground to supply our needs for today and the near term foreseeable future. Some of you have heard me say in the past that we have been, our industry has been suffering from the fact that, number one, people are being more conservation minded than they've ever been, and we're teaching them how to do that, by the way. And then number two, you can't buy a replacement appliance that isn't ridiculously more energy efficient than the one that you're replacing it with. And so our load per capita, the energy consumption on a per capita basis has been trending down over the last several years. I think that has, whatever the opposite of a plateau is, I think it's hit the valley. And I think it's going to start bottoming out. And then load, as you're talking about, Commissioner Selvage, is going to start bringing that trend line back up. And so we're going to have to be going through some more investment cycles. What we have, one of these arrows in our quiver, as Scott would say, one of these things that we have is Unit 8 is already 30 years old, or will be next year, I believe. And then Unit 5 will be 30 years old at the end of the decade. We have the opportunity to start looking at those alternatives for investments that we can do with those generators to try to see what is it that we need to do different with those. Instead of replacing Unit 8 with another 125 megawatt machine, maybe we should up that and get ready to plan for the future. Or, maybe hydrogen is going to be kicking in. I doubt it's going to be that quick. It's going to be more like Unit 5 timeline. So I think we have the ability to think through those, but from a water consumption standpoint, we're going to be mindful that we want to consume as little as possible so that we're not part of the problem.
So 920 is what we need now.
That's our requirement plus reserves.
What are we going to need in 2025 and 2030?
Our load has been fairly stagnant, but if you took 1% a year and added to that, that would be about what we'd be looking at.
Okay.
Now, if there's excess energy in the market, we can always buy from somebody else to help augment what we've got, and there's no shame in doing that. You've heard me say, Commissioner Selvage, in the past, this is the first place I've ever worked where we could serve 100% of our own needs if we had to.
Yeah.
I've never been to a place where we could do that, so this is pretty awesome.
Well, it is a fascinating business model. There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've talked before, what would happen because of water if we had a big employer come into town and we couldn't allow them to build a plant because our water needs can't meet it. And would we ever be in a position in 10 or 15 years where we'd have to tell a new employer, well, I'm sorry, we cannot give you the power that you need to do that? And so I guess the analogy is not exactly the same between water and power.
Well, but they're going to both go hand in hand because my industry tends to use a lot of water. you got to cool the machines down somehow, right? And so if there's things that we can do, and some of the things that we've done in the past is to take treated water instead of using fresh water.
Yeah.
So, and then that water that we're using that's treated, then we're sending it down the Alphi ultimately. So there are things that we can do that we all need to do. And so I forget who made that point earlier, but there's not going to be enough water. We're going to have to figure out how to get our hands on the stuff that you can use. And maybe we have to start treating, that nasty groundwater or something ourselves. There's always alternatives. It's just a matter of how much do you want to pay to get to that point.
Thank you.
The big difference between water and electricity in that analogy, Don, which does have a lot of similarities, is that there are alternatives for electricity, other alternatives, and there are methods of using less. Certainly that's true for us with water, except we have to drink a certain amount, we have to bathe in a certain amount, and there's nothing to replace that. So as we add people, the increments are more dramatically increased by water than they are electricity, because we're gaining something on the other side, on the electricity side. Now, certainly water conservation is important too, and so I don't mean to minimize that. Other comments by committee members? All right, now, yes, Mr. McGee.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Kind of a related question where committee member Don was talking about as far as the power generated. In 2030, it was forecasted that there will be more electrical vehicles than fuel consumption vehicles, the gasoline powered. So what increase will our plant tend to produce just to cover the increase of EV vehicles? Is it significant, or is it just a small amount?
I would say that it depends, and I hate to give answers like that, but it truly does depend. And so, you saw some of the charts. You saw the chart of the solar output with the solar or the customer load curve on it. If you could take that load curve and flatten it, you can make a whole lot better use of the resources that you already have, right? So our problem is we're always chasing this stupid peak in the afternoons in the summertime in Central Florida. We're always having to chase that bogey. And so if we could get people off of that peak and start getting it to more manageable times of the day, then all of a sudden we might have a better handshake use for the resources that we already have. So I'm hedging on my answer to you, Mike, because I'm hoping that we can start flattening that curve a little bit and make better uses of the resources that we have, so we don't have to continue to chase that 920 megawatt peak that Scott was talking about, or maybe it stays 920 megawatt because our growth is being put elsewhere on a time of day basis, and we can make better use of our resources. That's one of the targets that we're trying to get to. And so that's where the community awareness comes in. If everybody can understand it's cheaper if we don't build more generation, then maybe that's something that we could be successful in selling down the road.
All right. Thank you, Joe.
And that time of use is going to become critically important as we go forward in terms of leveling that. Okay, other comments? All right, then I think you have a second presentation, sir.
Well, I think Mr. Johnson had a question, Mayor.
Mr. Johnson, it's so funny. I sat there while he was talking about time of use, watching your face, expecting that hand to go up. And so go ahead, sir.
I had a couple of, the presentation is great. I appreciate the enthusiasm towards the presentation. I have a couple of three things that I would just like to throw out there for consideration. Number one, you mentioned a 60% CO2 reduction that we've experienced. And I was just interested, how did we get there?
It was 62 since 2004, I believe is what Scott said. We got there because we brought Unit 5 online. We brought Unit 5 online starting in 1999, and then I think we got it fully in combined cycle in 2001 timeframe. And then they went through some headaches trying to get it running and keep it running for a period of time. But once they got it running, then we started having an offset to the amount of carbon being produced by the coal generator, which was then being produced by a very, very efficient natural gas generator. So that's why you started seeing those numbers coming down.
Good. Okay. I just wondered how we got. Number two, the hydrogen deal piqued my interest because a number of years ago, I had an extended discussion with someone who was very excited about this and indicated to me that there were several universities around the state, and I think he mentioned specifically Stetson and maybe UCF, that were on the front end of this use of hydrogen for electric. And there was a company that was helping them install units. And I was just wondering if there was any, has there been any research or determination how those work? Was it successful? Was it unsuccessful or whatever? Because he indicated to me that they already had contracts with these universities and were committed to providing them with hydrogen-based electric. This was about 5 or 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Scott, do you know the answer to that?
So there's a debate as to the value of hydrogen based on its color. That's gray, blue, or green. So people are producing hydrogen, they're using them in production. I don't know specifically about those two universities, but there is industry starting to build contracts and starting to use hydrogen in production. It's real. The question is whether or not you've created more carbon by producing it than not. And green hydrogen's the panacea, if you will. The others are producing, just using natural gas and producing what they call blue hydrogen, which is much better than some of the other options. It's in the market. I don't know specifically those two universities. I can find out what they're doing.
I just wondered because I'll run this guy down and I'll find out and see if he can tell me any more information about it.
That'd be great.
Another thing that just hit again is this utility needs to put in place demand pricing, period. And we need to do it over a period of time and give people fair warning. But Joel just hit on it a minute ago. That's got to be a top priority, to put in demand pricing. We have the ability to do it, and it's got to be there. It's got to be there, in my opinion. So for what it's worth. Also, what happened to the tennis court situation where we were using solar in a solar battery on the tennis courts? What has been what have we seen on that? How has that worked?
Well, we never put solar on it, and we're going to do that now. So what we were doing is just charging the battery off peak, if you will, and then using that power in the case of emergency or from a battery backup perspective. What we didn't do was add solar to the thing, which makes perfect sense. I got that project a couple weeks ago, and we're going to try to put solar on that location, and then that's a better use of the battery technology that we have there at the tennis court at Bierman.
But we do have analytics based on the function of that battery so far.
Absolutely.
And we're going to get that charging station north of town?
Yeah, I-4 and 98 right there at the Travel Lodge, right there at the intersection of I-4 and 98. There'll be 4 of them there. Fast charging.
Fingers are crossed.
And Volkswagen's going to pay for it.
Yeah, we have to win the grant first. Yes, that's the right answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
I echo your sentiments, though, Committee Member Johnson, on the demand pricing. It's like water. We don't get conservative until it's up to us, and it affects us in our wallet. And the leveling those out and leveling out opportunities they created, especially if we have batteries in homes and things like that along the way, will motivate that. So I'm sure that as a committee, that is a direction we will be looking at policy going forward, I would suspect. Is that correct, Mr. Ivey?
Yes, sir. That very much is correct. Thank you.
All right. Any other committee member comments? And then your final presentation, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I would elect that we forego the final presentation. Mr. Cuss, I know, is on the edge of his chair, but he also can present this next month, and I guarantee you it will be as relevant next month as it is this month. In favor of that, I think instead of that, I'd like us to get into the one agreement that we need to try to get through as well.
Yes, sir. Let's go ahead.
Good afternoon. I think you heard Joel touch just a little bit earlier during his presentation on the decommissioning process. In this agreement, it's actually a task authorization with Black & Beach for the Unit 3 decommissioning planning services. It's a 2-phase task authorization. There's planning. Phase 1 is planning for the shutdown, and the second component of that is planning for demolition of the facilities. An RFQ was issued. by the city's purchasing department. We had a number of proposals submitted. Black & Veatch was selected as the most responsive engineering consulting service provider that was able to adhere to the city's RFQ. Upon approval by the city commission, they'll start the planning process, which is the second phase of planning is anticipated to be completed in September 2021. All the terms and conditions of this contract will be in accordance with a continuing contract that was previously approved in 2017, and the total not to exceed budget for this is $150,000, and that is included in Lakeland Electric's FY21 budget. And we would ask for your favorable recommendation.
Question, well, first of all, is there a motion to approve by the committee?
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Walker and Commissioner McLeod seconded it. All right, discussion by committee members. All right, seeing none, are there any other comments you want to make, Ms. Sirianni, with respect to that, or Mr. Ivy?
That's the only contract that we have for the utility committee's approval today.
Okay, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed by saying that unanimously passes. Oh wait, no, there is an opposition, Commissioner McCarley. Any other discussion by Mr. Ivy?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor, that is it for our presentations and our committee meeting today.
Just for the record, Ms. Sirianni is going to join us for the commission meeting today because Mr. Davis got stuck on air traffic in the snow in Chicago. And then Commissioner McCarley.
I wasn't in opposition. I think my computer's slow. I was in favor.
I saw a delay.
Okay, very good. Very good. So that would unanimously pass. Thank you. All right, is there a motion to adjourn? I see it from Mr. Cook has an announcement first.
Just a quick reminder, commissioners, we have a group photo of you guys at 2:30 in the City Commission chambers.
We will all be there, sir. Thank you.
And Kevin, I may be 2:33 or so. I'll be there as soon as I can.
He just wants to save that spot in the middle for him to slide right into. All right, any other, there's a motion to adjourn and a second. Then we'll just sit here. By Commissioner English. Okay, or Committee Member English. All those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed, same. We are adjourned unanimously.